Good evening, everybody. Thank you once again for joining us on the Sheila Exchange. As you know, we're on most Fridays at 5:30 p.m. Kuala Lumpur time. And today, our topic is on autism. Autism is a word that many people are not quite comfortable with, probably because they don't understand what it means. My own personal exposure, my first exposure ever to autism was when I watched Rain Man, a movie in which Dustin Hoffman brilliantly played an autistic savant. But as time went by, I realized that not all of people with autism are like Raymond, the character in the movie. Now, autism cannot be defined by one behavior or characteristic. Or diagnosis, right? So it refers to a broad spectrum of conditions characterized by challenges in social skills, repetitive behaviors, and communication, amongst other things. And I'm not the expert here, and that's why today I brought on three powerful, strong women who can probably tell you more about it than me. So because it's a spectrum disorder, each person who has it has a distinct set of strengths and challenges. And the ways in which people with autism think, learn, and problem solve can range from highly skilled to severely challenged. Am I right, Charlene? Right?
That's correct. That's correct.
And some people with the disorder, with the spectrum, may require significant support in their daily lives, while others may need less support and in some cases live entirely independently. Earlier this month, the world celebrated World Autism Awareness Day, and I thought before the month ends, the last day of April, it would be great to use the Sheila Exchange as a platform to spread some awareness about it. As you know, this is a platform where we talk about this and that, and this is a very important subject at this time. I have not had personal experience of it, but from the experiences of the two women here, Leela Barak and Dr. Sunita Sivakumaran, I know that they are going to tell you that autism is not the end of the world for a child or the families or loved ones. And so I've asked them to give you a perspective. Now, let me introduce my panel today. I've got Charlene Samuel. She's the managing director, founder at SP Autism Behavioral Center, Sendirian Berhad, probably one of the youngest people who has set up a facility like this. And she has dedicated her life to educating children and young people with the disorder. Leela Barak, is a colleague of mine. Once upon a time, we used to be journalists together. She's today the principal of Leela Barak and Associates in Sendirian Berhad, specializing in strategic advice and solutions for clients in challenging situations, as well as advocacy and counsel required in crisis communication. She is joining us from the backseat of a car, so she's masked. Okay, and Dr. Sunita Sivakumaran is the principal of Tarana, a school for special needs children, Petaling Jaya, run by the Rhythm Foundation. Both Leela and Dr. Sunita have children with the spectrum disorder. So thank you for joining us, ladies. Very grateful that you've taken time out on a Friday evening, and welcome to the Sheila Exchange.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
My pleasure. Right.
Thank you, Sheila.
So, Charlene, I'm going to start with you first. Can you tell us a bit more about autism? I mean, what are the signs? Are there signs in the first place?
Yep. So generally, it is a neurodevelopmental disorder. We usually see it in early developmental ages of children, usually before the ages of 3. Of late, because families are much more educated, the community is much more educated, there are much more resources. We're getting more children that are identified at an earlier age. So, when I first started as a therapist about 12 years ago, it was very common to work with 5-year-olds, teenagers, and this is relatively slightly later. But now it's more common, to work with much younger children at, 18 months, 24 months, 26 months. So primarily what we're looking at is usually the first signs of autism we will usually see is a speech delay. And this is usually what, correct me if I'm wrong, Dr. Sunita and Leela, that, sometimes families often mistake the early signs as just a speech delay. But what we see with autism is the speech delay is present with other challenges it comes in social challenges. So learning to socialize, communicating with friends can be very difficult. You know, losing flexibility in play, flexibility in routines can be challenging. So we see a lot of rigidities, insistence of sameness, that certain things must be done in a certain way. And also usually what we see is the repetitive behaviors or over obsessive interest in certain topics. So for example, I have met very young children, about 3.5, and they can tell me everything they know about American muscle cars. And this is not quite what you will see in a 3-year-old, you see, because they're so interested in certain topics, they know more than most people. But the challenges here is because they are very interested and because they're on the spectrum, they do struggle to shift topics. So they end up continuously coming back to the same topic. So these are individuals that are more verbal. And for those that are not quite verbal or still learning to verbalize, you may see the rigidities come in form of behaviors. So, you know, we have work with some children that insist to wear pajamas all day. They don't want to change, you know, or they only want to drink a certain, you know, from a certain cup or eat from a certain plate, you know, or when they go to school, only daddy must send me. If mommy sends me, it's not okay. So generally, so this is what we will see. We will see speech delays, challenges with behaviors. So we see repetitive behaviors, insistence of sameness, sometimes odd behaviors like flapping their hands, tiptoeing, side gazing, you know, spinning in circles. And we see lack or poor socialization or inappropriate socialization.
Okay, thank you so much for that, Charlene, for giving us an overview of that. So, Leela, at what age did you become aware that your son had autism spectrum disorder?
I think I was aware when he was about a year and a half old. He was 18 months old, but everybody around me said, oh, he's a boy, you know, he'll take longer to learn how to speak. All the usual things, everyone said that. So I did not do anything about it until he was 2. And then I got it verified that yes, he is autistic, he is on the spectrum.
And you, Dr. Sunita?
Yeah, it was actually around when my son was about 20 months old, because he's the second child. So what I did was I kept comparing him with my older son. And I realized that, you know, this boy wasn't speaking. In fact, he did speak when he was 1 year old. And then after a while, it started regressing. Instead of progressing, he started regressing. And the most obvious symptom for me was eye contact, because he lost eye contact. And he had this habit of flapping his hands and jumping insistently. So these were the things that actually prompted me. So what I did was I brought him at when he was about 20 months old to see a pediatric neurologist. And unfortunately, when she did the test, she did a couple of tests and she just told me, she said, your son is not normal, you know?
Yeah.
So yeah, so that, I mean, I will never forget that day, because the way she told me, and she just didn't know how to sympathize, empathize. And she just told me, she said, he's not normal. So now you have to attend to him, you know, and see what you can do.
How did you feel? How did you feel at that diagnosis being given to you? He's not normal. It's not that he's not normal. He has autism spectrum disorder, right?
So
how, those words, when they were thrown at you, how did you feel?
Ayo, Sheila, I tell you, I felt like the whole world had come crashing down at me, you know, and I just didn't know what to do. All I did was tear. And fortunately, my husband was with me at that point in time. So he just looked at me. I mean, we were both helpless. So we just carried this boy, and then, you know, we left the room and came back, of course, you know, crying for a few days. Why me? What has happened? And, you know, I suppose we were hoping that it was not true. But what happened later, when he turned about, after his second birthday, I think when he was about 2.5 years old, I took him to see Dr. Shantini Banyasingham, who's a pediatric psychologist. I think she's still at SGMC. So what I did was I made an appointment and took him to see her. And she, of course, again, ran 2 sessions, you know, of assessment and then confirmed that he's autistic. So ever since Vishaka was 2.5 years old, I mean, we knew that he was autistic. And then, of course, I just told myself, okay, hereafter I have to do what is necessary for this child. Yeah.
And Leela, what was your reaction? How did you took him for an evaluation? What was your reaction when you were told? We can't hear you, Leela. You're muted.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
It's raining cats and dogs here, so you might hear that too.
Okay.
Yeah. So even though I already knew, inside, when it was confirmed, I've never been shocked in my life, but I think that's what it feels like. So sometimes, even now, I feel the same way. Like he does something, he goes through a really bad day, and that sense of, I guess it's loss. Because when you have children, we have expectations, we have dreams. We're all told not to do that, not to impose our values and ideals on our children. But I think we all do, up to a point. And we have these dreams and these hopes and these expectations, and all of that vanishes immediately. So it's a huge sense of loss. And I think it's something that stays with you forever. Yeah.
And did you get a lot of support from the people around you when you found out? And did they sort of like come through and help you to raise your child, to deal with it? Or did you have ugly comments being thrown at you as well?
Well, I'll do the ugly comments first, because that was a really odd experience for me. And it happened in church, where you expect to get support. So I'd taken my son to church, and he loves church. He loves anything with pageantry and pomp, and there was a singing, and he would belt out, the songs at the top of his lungs and all that. And someone told me there's a room at the back where you can take your son, because he's a bit disruptive, and he's, not doing what a good Catholic boy should do in church, whatever that may be. And I think that was a truly awful experience. And it didn't happen once, it happened twice. And the second time, my mother, who's this lovely, lovely person, she actually lost her head and she told people off. And I've not taken him back to church since then. So that happened a long time ago. But having said that, I was very fortunate at the time, because I worked at the Edge with you. And I made the decision that I needed to step back from my career to spend more time with Ray. And they were so fully supportive. And I got time. I was allowed to step away from the rat race, but keep my job. And the job was demanding and all of that, but they still let me take that time, take him for therapies, come into the office a bit later. And if I had to leave everything and go back home, that was fine. And in those days, working from home wasn't a thing yet. I mean, you're talking about 2004, 2005, but still people like, if I had to name names, I guess Anna and Keta, they were so understanding. And, it was no questions asked. You just go and do what you have to do. And at home, of course, I have my mom. And,
we're losing you, Leela. We're losing you. Breaking up a little bit. Okay, Leela, we're losing you a little bit. I think you're going through a bad zone there. So I'm just going to shift to Dr. Sunita for a while until we get you back. Dr. Sunita, what about you? Did you have some really bad experiences, good experiences from the people around?
My friends,
okay.
The people who are there would say, okay, and they'll drop everything, they'll turn up at Alexis for like 6 feet tall, 18 years old.
18 years old and 6 feet tall. Okay. Sunita, I think we've lost Leela for a while there. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, Sheila, I mean, I have had unpleasant experiences, especially, of course, I will start off by saying that, the people who were most supportive were actually my husband and my parents. And fortunately, at that point in time, I was living quite close to my mom and dad. So they would actually help me, to attend to my son, in the sense that my mom being a retired teacher, so that was kind of helpful, because she would actually come into the house during the day and work with my son and then leave once, come back. So that was the good part of it. But of course, the ugly side was that, and it was very disappointing, because people whom you thought were the closest to you were the ones who would actually let you down in times like this. So I've had, even relatives telling me things like, Sunita, you cannot bring your son for the function. We are having a dinner and he will probably disrupt the function. So if you don't mind, please leave him at home. And how do I attend a function when someone has told me you can't bring your son? So the next thing would be for me not to go. So sometimes I used to ask myself, am I indirectly telling me, no, I'm sorry, you're not supposed to come, by telling me that you can't bring your child. So I've had situations whereby, in a very subtle way, some of them have said, it's only you and Jeevan invited for this dinner or this function. So I've had that. I've also had people coming much later. When Vishaka was a teenager, telling me that, oh, you can't keep him in the house. You should actually think of a home and leave him in a home. He's not someone that you want to keep. So these are the statements that I've heard over the years, Sheila, and now I've become immune, because I tell myself they're not in my shoes. They will never understand me. And I'm not interested in educating them either, because I know it's going to be a very painful session for me trying to educate them. So over the years, I've come to accept that, okay, when something like this happens to you, you have to learn to handle it yourself. Do not expect anyone to come forward, If you do have people coming forward, it's a blessing, but otherwise you just have to, attend to these things on your own. So of course, in terms of the sacrifices that I've made, I was in legal practice. And upon finding out that Vishaka was autistic, I quit practice and went into teaching because that gave me more time to work with this child. So I did that. So in fact, he was born in 98 November. I came to find out in 2001, I quit practice and I joined teaching actually as a lecturer in Methodist College. And ever since then, I've been teaching. So, that has given me the leeway actually to work with my son because I have more time. And of course, today when I sit back and look at what has happened to him and what has happened to me, no doubt, I didn't get to do what I wanted to do, but at least my child has come this far. So, that is what I'm really proud of, because today Vishaka is an independent boy. He's able to do a lot of things, and whatever sacrifices I've made, hasn't gone to waste.
Yeah. Great. That's fantastic. Now, I can understand Dr. Sunita and Leela educating themselves and, sort of wanting to understand more about this. In your case, because they had children with autism, Charlene, you graduated from university and then you decided to start an autism consultancy, having had no experience of it before. What took you into that field?
Good question. So I was really lucky that I started as a therapist part-time actually when I was in my second year of degree studying psychology. And I met the most amazing little boy. His name is Daniel. And he honestly changed my life. So I was his therapist. I worked with him for about 3-4 years. And through therapy, I saw how much he grew, and that kind of inspired me to do more at that point of time. So when I left university, I continued to work because I needed to gain more experience working with individuals in the different parts of the spectrum, different ages. But about 5 years after that, then I opened up the consultancy. This is prior to ABC, of course. That's how I think at that point of time we met as well. So I definitely wanted to reach more families at that point. Until today, I would say there is still a struggle of finding evidence-based and quality intervention. There are a lot of people out there that really want to help. I've met amazing people with the biggest hearts, but it may not necessarily translate into quality intervention. That's one thing. And additionally, in all honesty, I think Dr. Sunita and Leela can share as well that intervention is not cheap. Because of so many things, and primarily I would say is specifically the census don't match here. Like I really feel there are more individuals that are affected by with autism, but it's underreported. And because of that, we are also lacking the support that the families are lacking the support that, they need. So for example, the science that we used to teach in ABC is called ABA, Applied Behavior Analysis. It's the gold standard autism treatment. In America, 49 states, from the last I checked, 49 states have approved ABA as being, the standard of autism treatment, and it's fully paid for by insurances. So we're getting a vast majority of families that are able to access quality intervention. But over Malaysia and many Asian countries in general, I would say quality intervention will need to come at a price. And I think, Dr. Sunita and Ms. Leela can share that as well. And it is a real reality, because even for ABC right now, we're bringing in, professionals from America, from all over the world to train us, because it just doesn't exist right now. And that comes with a huge price tag. Yeah, but it is for families, I would say it's not easy. It is, even when families come to meet me, and I am very honest with them, and I will tell them this is going to be an investment for you, both your time and your finances. And this is something that you need to be able to sustain in the long run, But it's just very unfortunate, I will have to say, that, being able to support so many families that we're really, really blessed. But not all families can access quality intervention, because, as I said, it usually comes at a price.
It does. It has been tremendously expensive. If you want to put a monetary value on it, I don't think I can. The bills just keep stacking up and piling up, and you pay it. And I always wonder about those families who can't afford it and how they are trying to make ends meet. So in that sense, I've been very blessed. Yeah. So yeah.
And Charlene, that's also one reason you started ABC, right? You wanted to make it sort of affordable, tailor a package within the affordability of the families.
Yes, so that was initially with a prior autism consultancy. That was the initial plan. We reached a lot of families, but then that came to a point that ABA is a science, and science changes over time, and you need to get continued training. So I would have to be very honest, it's not quite the situation right now in ABC, because of the intensity of the hours that we have, the credentials that we have. We get the best trainers from all over the world coming to train with us. So I would say it has shifted. But the intention, when I first reached out to families with autism consultancy, we were primarily supporting the families that couldn't afford services. So now what ABC does is, I'm sure, both the parents here can share, like, it is a lifelong commitment. There's a lot of financial expenditure to it, but we really try to educate the public. So that's the role that I primarily play right now. On top of growing ABC, we do a lot of public education, and this is completely for free. So what we've done in a couple of years is, we've trained staff in Sunway malls, as well as this year we launched Malaysia Airports recently. So we so we've trained the immigration personnel, the frontliners, the concierge, basically everybody you need to make your journey to the airport and even in a mall more comfortable for families. And this is families from all walks of life, any language you speak, any state you come from. So that's how ABC is giving back right now, because what we realize in the end of the day, one of the issues we're having is, I think a lot of families, and I think as from the stories I was hearing, it is very true. Our families do share these very, familiar stories that, they can't really bring their children out very much because of the judgment from the public, and there's lack of education of understanding what autism is. There's lack of tolerance and respect for individuals with autism, and somebody needs to play that role in educating them. So that has been our goal, I would say, for the last 2 to 3 years. On top of the intervention that we provide, we are trying to reach out to as many schools, public spaces like malls and airports. That was a really big deal for us, because now the airport is more equipped to support individuals, not just with autism, but hidden disabilities in general, to make that whole process smooth. However, now with COVID, we're not really flying, but I really hope that, when things pick up, at least families feel a little bit more confident, and to know that, there's a huge number of people here that are able to accommodate to their needs.
Thank you for that, Charlene. Quite enlightening and very inspiring to know that you and your team are actually doing this for the community. Now, Leela, I'm sure when, back then, when your son was diagnosed, I don't know if you had young people like this, or you had people out there who wanted to create so much of awareness. So you were probably being the educator for all the people in your milieu, as, you know, in terms of your son's the disorder. So how has that sort of shaped you in terms of sort of advocacy, being an advocate? Do you sometimes feel that because you've gone through this, you know, the need to educate people, a longing to educate people, or is it just a journey that you feel that, okay, I've gone through this and that's enough?
Well, for me, it was a very personal journey, and it was something that I took on my own. While there was support, a lot of the responsibility was almost entirely mine. And when I talk about responsibility, it's not just the financial, it's also the decision making. What do I do next? Do I do this or do I go for that? And so looking for the speech therapist, we were so lucky. His pediatrician was Dr. Vernon Lee at the time. So Vernon referred me to his Jennifer, who became his speech therapist for many years. And Jennifer was God sent. She was just brilliant, Jennifer Peters. And I wish I had done more in terms of advocacy, but there were choices that I had to make at that point in time. So my son required time. I have another child, his older sister. And I was very conscious of the fact that I didn't want her to feel in any way sidelined or left behind or left out. So I was overcompensating and trying to spend time with her. And at the same time, I had to have the career because someone had to pay the bills. And so something had to give. So I gave up on the advocacy part, which was something I really wanted to have the opportunity to do. So instead I thought, okay, I'll be the good mother and I will focus on my career. I gave up being a wife, and, you know, I'm very lucky that my mother cannot divorce me because I'm still her daughter. And yeah, so that was what I did. So I just focused on the career. It's always very lucky. Even when I moved on to Sime Darby later, they were very supportive. The CEOs were always supportive. There's a period where Ray got sick and he was in hospital for 10 days. And my boss said, take off. And what I did was I moved my whole team to the hospital, and we were running the department from SJMC, which was, I was able to do that because it was part of the group. But in the sense that my boss actually allowed that, it was incredible. So I didn't get to do a lot of the advocacy part, but then what did happen with Ray was, I think he was my reality check, and he was the person who made me a better person. Because no matter how clever you think you are, you hear noises in the background, that's Ray, by the way. Yeah, so no matter how clever you think you are, how capable you think you are, you're suddenly faced with an autistic child, and none of who you are matters. You can't fix this problem just like that. You can do your best and you give it a damn good shot, which I have, but he sort of grounds you. And he probably made me a better person in that sense, and a lot more patient. And that sort of helped in the careers that I subsequently moved through. I mean, with journalism, it was easy. And then, you go on to the corporate world and you start dealing with a whole spectrum of people. And I use the term intentionally. And it was the Ray experience that taught me to do that. And so, yeah, now, probably at some point in the next few years, I will try to go back to that advocacy, raise awareness, because you have so many children Ray's age. He's now 18. And what's next for him? He can't be in special school for the rest of his life. So what's next for him? And those options are not very many as well, but there are a lot more now than they were when we started on this journey. So that would be an area that I'd be interested in exploring. What can you do for young people, for young adults who are on the spectrum and who, in Ray's case, is verbal, but he will need assistance. So what can he do? Is he going to be stuck at home with his iPad because he's too old for school? Or what's going to happen next? What's next? So that will be probably the journey that I will take next. And then it will be proper advocacy. You can do this again in 5 years and ask me if I've done it.
That's fantastic. You can start the conversation with Charlene now.
I think
right. Yeah, I think Charlene, another resource that Leela is in, PR, communications, crisis management, one of the most intelligent, clued in women I know in that field. So, good to have that conversation with her. Dr. Sunita, what about you? I mean, you clearly did that path in education, you gave up law, went into education, and now you are the principal of a school for children with special needs. Was that sort of like a natural progression, or did that opportunity just come and you said, okay, this is what everything that has happened has prepared me for this?
Yeah, I mean, now when I sit back and think about Vishaka, Sheila, I think that's why Vishaka came into my life, because, when I used to ask this question, why me? But 22 years later, I can safely tell, I think Vishaka came into my life because one day I was supposed to hold this job. That's what I keep asking, telling myself. Because in the early years, when I was faced with this problem, just like what Leela said, it's, when you have to deal with this and you've got an older child, you have to sort of like balance, and you can't just spend all the time on one kid and neglect the other one. So yeah, that was what I was busy doing. And of course, at that point in time, there weren't many centers. I did send him for speech, occupational therapy, and then ABA therapists and so forth. But they were all over the place, and it was just running here, and, trying to put things right for him. And then fortunately, I met a few people, and there were these two people. One was Puan Saria. She was the head of the National Dyslexic Center, and another lady called Dr. Maliga from Australia. So they were the ones who actually helped me to sort of like, prepare a schedule and do things for Vishaka. So that sort of helped. And in fact, Dr. Maliga is the one who told me this. She said, Sunita, if you can train an animal for a circus, why can't you train your child? So you just have to do what you think is right and keep doing it repeatedly, and you will someday master the skills. So that is what I did, Sheila, with him. And as I said, today he's able to paint. He can cook for, a basic meal. When I say meal, he can do some fried rice for himself. He can toast his own bread. Yeah, he can do all of that. So when he reached the age of 16, I told myself, okay, now I have to do something for this kid. And what do I do? So that's when I found this center in Cameron Highlands, where they actually teach them independent living skills, and Vishaka is there now. So looking at what the center has done for him, I tell myself, not everybody is fortunate to have that, that facility, in the sense that we were fortunate because I met someone and that person introduced me to the then principal of that school. And when I met him, he was very, happy to meet us and, see Vishaka. And he immediately told me, yeah, you can bring Vishaka in. So Vishaka has been there, and he comes back once a month. And of course, today, when I look at the children that, I have at Tarana, it's so unfortunate because most of the parents are actually emphasizing on academic, but they fail to realize that self-help skills, living skills is what is so essential for these kids. So when this opportunity came, actually, initially I was so reluctant because I told myself, I don't know whether I'm even equipped. But then I said, okay, let me give it, a try. And
I think you're more equipped than a lot of people who might have gone and had the theoretical education to do the job. You've had, the school of hard experience.
Yes. Yeah, hard experience. Yeah. So when I actually started doing it, I took on the job in February, and I'm glad that I took it, because now I realized that at least the little things that I've done for the kids, like self-help skills, I've made it compulsory that, the teacher even has to teach the child how to lay the table, clean his table mat, put the table mat aside, etc., 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 because these are little things that the children need to learn. So you don't wait till the child reaches the age of 18, but I think you can start off when the child is about 7 or 8 years old. So yeah, so talking about, going back to your question, Sheila, as to why I took on this job, I reached a point where I said that, okay, I know there are so many parents, going through difficulties because they do not know. I think awareness is one of the major problems here. They're not aware how to handle. And since I've had the opportunity of meeting some people who have actually taught me, why not share it with other parents? So that is how I ended up being in Charana.
Great, thank you for that. And I kind of like, you know, the fact what both of you and Leela said, that at some point you really need to give them those occupational skills, the living skills. So so that they can at least do something to show that they're independent, to contribute. You can't keep them at home, as Leela said, with an iPad forever, you know. So
Yeah.
I think that is something that we really need to be looking at. So Charlene, would you say that there is enough focus or attention being given to that? So right now they're diagnosed at an early age, they come in, they go for the ABA therapy, and then, you know, they're taught this and they're taught that. Then what happens after that? So many, I'm sure, correct me if I'm wrong, are most of your clients within the sort of, you know, teenage and less, or are they older? What happens?
So most of our children right now, they're children. So most of them, I would say, is 4 and younger. There is really lack of resources, support, places that you can support older individuals. And I think that's a real reality for a lot of families that have older children, teenagers, adults. There's just no place for it. ABC, we do cater to adults. We have a couple of adults and teenagers with us as well. But if you're looking at the majority of our centers, most of these centers that provide services are early intervention centers. So mostly working with, young children. So it is really, there is a lack of resources for older individuals. And that question of, what's next? It is a very big question for a lot of families. Like for us, we do individualized education, so we teach primarily, for us, communication always has to come first, regardless if you're verbal or non-verbal, followed by everything else. And I 100% agree with Dr. Sunita. I think just coming from the Asian culture, I would say, there's too much emphasis on academics. And this is something that we always have to remind and somewhat educate families as well, that, if you put it in perspective, if you could do 2 + 2, but you can't even ask for water or for a meal, how functional is the individual, So we do emphasize a lot on communication skills and behavior management. That is the 2 things we emphasize on. Communication, because, you must be able to somewhat care for yourself, ask for what you need. Behaviors for us is also very important, because that's usually what we see on the spectrum. And if that is addressed early, then the opportunities to, we call it re-socialization, going back to school, going back to communities, having a job, going to university, going for classes, all of these become much more doable, doors open to you because behaviors are in check. Usually, from what I know, a lot of centers generally shy away from older individuals, primarily because of behaviors. Because as individuals get older, and especially if behaviors are not addressed at a younger age, we can potentially be dealing with very rigid behaviors, sometimes aggressive behaviors towards themselves and other people. But for most of the individuals that we work with, honestly, aggression is not something we see very often. So this is a misconception. However, we do see it a lot, especially as they grow older, and there's so much they want to express, so much they want to say, but oftentimes very minimal skills to do it, because communication has not been addressed. So that's primarily, I would say, there's a lot of intervention, early intervention centers out there, not enough focusing on on older individuals. However, I do know there are a lot of corporate companies right now that are focusing on hiring individuals with varied abilities, which they're now talking about it. I believe on Clubhouse the other day, I was not present, but I was told that, I think Tony Fernandez was on Clubhouse as well, and a couple of other big corporations, and they are looking into the possibilities of hiring individuals, training and hiring individuals with differing, abilities and disabilities as well. So I think doors are opening, but I think more people need to come out and voice the need. But yeah, it's very unfortunate. So I'm sure Dr. Sunita and Leela will share, you know, when the children were younger, they probably had much more options of where to go and who to see. But as the individual, as your child gets older, you will see your locations and professionals that are willing to work with them sort of dwindle down, because there are not many professionals that can and are able to work with older individuals. Just not enough emphasis on it.
Mm-hmm.
That's true.
So, yeah, so thank you for that insight, Charlene. So, Leela, from your point of view, what would you like to see happening right now? Your son is 18, and you know, you've been pondering his future. And for me, it was sort of perplexing why parents are focusing on the academics rather than in equipping these children to face life as independently as they can. So what would you like to see, Leela, happen?
Well, right now, the Ray's capacity to care for himself is not quite there. Yeah, in the sense that he can have a shower by himself and he can get dressed. But it's that thing, maybe this is partly my fault. Can he cook a meal for himself? I'm terrified of, you know, the thought of him handling anything that's hot, going near the stove and, you know, setting fire to the house maybe, and himself. And so we don't know whether he can. The school tells me that he can. With supervision, he can. I've been a lot more careful with that. So there are things that I probably have to do to loosen the cord, if you like. Yeah, and to let him go a little bit. But I'd like him to be able to acquire skills that he can use. So he feels useful. He understands the concept of contribution. Yeah. So when we are in a group, he wants to contribute to the conversation. He wants to be a part of it. He wants to be included. And there is this thing where his sister went off to boarding school in the UK. So for the longest time, he wanted to go to boarding school in the UK too. And then I took him to the boarding school and he realized it was all girls. So then he asked if there was a boys' boarding school nearby, and there was. So then he wanted to go to that boarding school. So now she's going to start working. So he wants to start working too. So he does understand that. He understands that mommy goes to work, that his dad goes to work. And so he also wants to go to work. And I think that would make him feel more useful, more included. But what can he do when he's out there? I mean, that would be a question. And I would need guidance probably on how I can achieve that. School tells me he's very good. He's very methodical. So he's good at administrative stuff. But I need to see that. And he doesn't make mistakes because he can see a whole string of numbers and he can tell immediately if something's not right there. He can compare it and you know, so which is why they like him doing. He's doing a little bit of part-time work in the school already. You know, but is that what he's best at? You know, will that allow him to feel fulfilled? I think a lot of that's there. I don't even know if he will have the same needs as my daughter, who's quote unquote normal. She understands what fulfillment is and she's going for it. And I don't know if he will have the same, I don't think it's the same definition, fulfillment, but I don't yet know what it is. It would be so good if we can explore things like that, if there are avenues and opportunities. There are things that he likes to do, like when we go to the supermarket, he likes to do the checkout thing. And I go to the same village grocer every week. And when I take him with me, the girls are really wonderful. They let him go to the checkout and you know, check everything out. And he beeps and he gets very excited. And he has this huge sense of accomplishment. That feels like a very mundane task that, you know, the kind of family you come from, oh, you know, he's working in a checkout, he's a cashier, that sort of thing. Is that okay? Is that enough? Is that enough for him? You know, so it would be so good to be able to have conversations with people to know what he can do and what's best for him at the end of the day. And that's where I need to start exploring and finding the right people. I know of some of the corporates who have taken on autistic children, and then had to let them go because the other staff couldn't cope with it. You know, so, and this is a very large corporate where the majority shareholder actually has an autistic son as well. So I think it's with the best of intentions that they have these programs. And then we were keeping track of his Ray's old classmate who started working there. And then they had to let him go because the other staff couldn't cope with it. So that's one thing, but how would he have felt in that sense of failure maybe? You know, or rejection. And I want to protect Ray from that. So I would take very careful baby steps, but it would be so good if there was someone who could take us through that journey and say, oh, maybe assess him properly and say, oh, he can do this. The school right now is a very safe space because he's been there for years and everyone knows him, he knows everyone. And he can turn up and he does all the laminating in the school because he's apparently very good at it. And he issues all the invoices when we have paid the fees. Yeah, and the receipts. So he does all of that for the school. So, but is that enough? Yeah.
Great, thank you for that. I mean, it's lovely. I've met Ray. He's the sweetest boy. He's lovely and, you know, lovely to be around. So I cannot imagine him going to work somewhere and people say we're not comfortable with him, you know, really. Yeah. So there needs to be a concerted effort to educate. I think before you take on this well-intentioned, you know, actions of inclusiveness, you also need to make sure that the people who are going to be there interacting with these young people are also educated. Dr. Sunita, do you have any input into that, to what Leela just shared?
Yeah, what I would really want to see is that, you know, because right now we have schools that take in children from the age of 4 right up to 18. But what happens to these kids after that? You can't just, you know, keep them at home. So we have got centers like Wisma Harapan and Kiwanis that actually have sheltered workshops. But I haven't visited those places, so I can't really tell you how it is, Sheila. But it will be good if we can have centers that will take in these older kids and train them and prepare them for, you know, job placement. Because I know there are some organizations that take, like Sunway, for example, they take in these children. But yeah, how do they go in, you know, how to prepare them to actually start working and whether they should be assisted with a job coach and so forth. So these are the things that should be in place actually, because the center where my son is going to currently in Cameron's, actually last year they had a good arrangement, but unfortunately due to COVID, they couldn't implement it. What they did was they had actually made some arrangements with the hotels in Cameron Highlands to take these children in for 1 week a month. So the child will go in and then be exposed to different areas like the housekeeping department, laundry, and the kitchen department. So the child goes in with one of the teachers and then gets exposed to the skills and the job. And then he comes back and they were supposed to train them in the school. But due to COVID, they were not able to implement it. So I would think something like that with the teacher who understands the child will be good. But in KL, unfortunately, we do not have such facilities as yet. Yeah.
So maybe that's food for thought for you, Charlene Samuel. Yeah,
yes, I will definitely think about it. Yeah, we are in discussions for this. I would say the tricky part, generally, I mean, the ideas are great, but I do also understand from a like a support, like for interventionists or schools or coaches coming in. The tricky part, I would say, would be being able to accommodate a spectrum of individuals. Yeah. So that's where I would say professionals like us and, you know, whatever that's required from the job, we actually need to come up with like prerequisite skills that need to be taught. So specifically for individuals on the spectrum, you know, there are many jobs that you can have access to, but you may not necessarily need to be able to be verbal. You need to have the understanding. Maybe you need to be able to follow a certain routine. You know, some will do very well with, you know, having a fixed structure. Some will do well with in a different environment that motivates them, always something new every day. So that's the tricky part, I would say, generally about working with individuals on the spectrum. That's why I think it's really hard to come up with like a set structure of like, hey, this is how we're going to train you to be like, maybe administration or, or something in finance. So it can be a little bit tricky, but not impossible. I think definitely, a couple of us need to take that first step. But as we were talking about it, I think that was the trickiest part. How do we make it, inclusive to everybody on the spectrum? So the reality of it is, we can't right away, but we will need to take that steps. So these are the individuals and these are the prerequisite skills that we will need. And this is, the prototype we're going to go with. Let's have a go at this. And over time, we can expand that. But we definitely need more of that because, there are just so many families and individuals that we speak to, and not all of them could continuously need intervention, like very intensive intervention. And they've gone beyond that. Sounds a little bit like, Dr. Sunita and Leela's children, that they've gone beyond that. So what's next? And I think sometimes being on the fence, right? So you don't require full support, but yet you're not quite ready to be 100% independent. And then where do you fit? So I think that's the tricky part, for older individuals or teenagers or adults, like where exactly do they fit? Do we have an environment that is ready to take them on? And as I think it was Leela that was saying, it is a real reality. I think there are a lot of people who want to help that, but may not be able to sustain the idea of hiring someone on the spectrum, because for so many things, like we are working with a spectrum of people with, varying challenges and strengths, and I think just because of like a behavior, like, we're looking at rigidities, insisting certain things are done a certain way, even how you would need to speak or sometimes even reason with individuals on the spectrum may differ. You need a lot of patience, you need more structure. Not everybody is potentially ready for this. It is going to take a lot of effort.
And I think it's also going to take a will on the rest of us, people who run organizations and society in general, to have a will to understand more. I think it's probably because people don't understand that much about autism, that the spectrum and the various challenges and successes that the people within the spectrum have. And I certainly hope, ladies, that by our conversation this evening, that we've helped people to see it a little differently, that we've shed some light, some perspective on, on the disorder. And also that for young parents out there with children who've just been diagnosed, I really want you to know that there is opportunity to, take your children on this journey. Dr. Sunita and Leela have been doing it for the better part of their lives since their children were diagnosed. And, they brought their children so far by availing of the opportunities out there. And they've been very open about it. Go out there, get the help you need. You can always get in touch. You can always PMS at Human Equation. And if these women are, these ladies present here today are happy to talk with you and have a chat with you and a cup of coffee to share their experiences with you. If they are, then that might help you. There is Charlene Samuel, a fantastic resource for you to at least start that conversation. Where do I go from here? Yeah. So it is not the end of the world. And as Leela Barak mentioned earlier, having Ray, and of course, Sunita as well, Dr. Sunita, having your children has helped shape you into the people that you are today, better people that you are today. And so there is always a reason for everything that happens. Thank you so much, Charlene Samuel, Dr. Sunita Sivakumaran, Leela Barak. Thank you for being so generous and open in your sharing. It's not easy sometimes to come on an open platform and talk about this. And I truly, from the bottom of my heart, appreciate your being here and joining us today. Thank you once again. You've been listening to me, Sheila Singham, speaking to these 3 lovely women on the Sheila Exchange. Thank you for joining us this week.